Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 252. Today we're talking to Amy Bodkin. Amy is a former school psychologist turned special needs consultant and speaker. She is the founder of Amy Bodkin Consulting Online and the author of the book, Special Needs Kids Are People Too. We're talking all about how to be an ally to our kids, how to boost their confidence and connect with them, and to support them in everything that they need. I know you are going to love this episode, so pop those earbuds in and get a notebook ready, or just listen and enjoy, and you can revisit the show notes later if you want some notes on it, because there's a lot of goodness in this episode. All right, let's get on with it right after this word from our sponsor. Are you a homeschooling parent with a child struggling with reading, writing, or spelling? Lexercise can help. Their online platform offers self-paced learning and expert instruction customized to your child's needs, all based on the Orton-Gillingham approach. We used Lexercise back when Logan was first diagnosed with dyslexia when she was, 8 or 9. And oh my goodness, the personalized support they gave us, the attention to detail, the program itself was just incredible, and Logan grew leaps and bounds. I'm so proud to have them as a sponsor for the podcast right now because more people need to know about their services. You can join thousands of families who have seen effective results, including mine, and have unlocked their child's love of learning. Visit lexercise.com/learners for a free learning disabilities screener and to learn more about their program. Check them out and let me know what you think. Ask me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them or direct you to my contacts at Lexercise. But if you have a kiddo who struggles with reading, writing, or spelling, you definitely want to check out lexercise.com/learners and see what they can offer you. All right, let's get on with today's episode. I am so excited to be here with a guest new to me, fairly new to me, but highly recommended by a mutual friend. And I've been told multiple times over the last several months that I need to get Amy on the podcast. So you guys are going to love this episode. I'm talking to Amy Bodkin. Amy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I have also heard a lot about you over the last year, so it's nice to finally get to meet each other face to face.
Yeah, I love meeting people who are passionate about the same types of things and in the same world. And so you also work with homeschooling families who are raising neurodivergent special needs kids. And so we're going to talk about that. But first, why don't you just take a minute and introduce yourself, let us know who you are, what you do, a little bit about your background and your family too, because I think that's important in as far as what we're going to be talking about.
Awesome. I am autistic myself, and I was also trained as a school psychologist. I used to work in public schools, then I consulted with private schools. I also did some private practice work. And then finally, I found my way into working mostly with homeschool families and doing some advocacy work. And that has been my happy place. Like it's where I always wanted to be, and I just didn't know I wanted to be there. I have ADHD, I'm dyslexic, I have an auditory processing disorder, I have Ehlers-Danlos, I have POTS. I have so many different things that describe all of the complexities of me and how they are not like the average. This past year, they have now described me as a medical unicorn. We've just got all the specialness going on over here. And I also have 2 children, and they are also both autistic, ADHD, have Ehlers-Danlos. One's dyslexic, one's hyperlexic, one has nonverbal learning disability. The other one is extremely artistic. They both have auditory processing disorders. Like we've just got this whole plethora of fun outside the box things going on in our house. And then we have my husband, who's the most neurotypical person out there. And somehow he manages to survive in the chaos that we create. Because yes, it does look like chaos because we have no executive functioning skills.
I hear you on that one.
So that's a little bit about who I am. I work with homeschoolers worldwide, and they don't have to have a diagnosis. I work with kids who are cancer survivors, have been adopted, have autism, ADHD, are neurodivergent, or have some kind of learning difference, have a physical disability, have a parent who has a chronic health condition that's causing challenges in their homeschool, just about anything. I do psychological assessment, try and figure out what kind of pattern do we have going on with this kid, because that's what I'm really good at. I'm really good at patterns. And so once I can figure out what that pattern is, then we can figure out, okay, what supports are the right ones for your kid? Because you can take a broad brushstroke approach, which is what most curriculums and such do. But wouldn't it be easier if we thought about this like surgery? Wouldn't it be a lot easier if instead of using an axe to take off the whole leg, what if we just use a scalpel to take off the mole? That'd be a lot easier and a lot less painful and uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure.
Most kids like those kinds of suggestions.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of looking for patterns within as well. It feels more solution driven than than problem driven, which I think is so
Yes.
important when you're working with families who have children who are just a little bit different or outside the box or quirky in some way. And so that seems a much more proactive approach than what we're conditioned to do, which is find the problem and fix it.
Yes, exactly. We want to help kids become their best selves, not focus on what's wrong with them and how we can fix them. That's not very positive.
No, and as you said before, there are families, we are one, you are one, that have all sorts of different like letters that they're dealing with and diagnoses or not being diagnosed. We're the same in the community that I run online, the Learners Lab. There's no diagnosis required to be in there, but you know that you need something more than you're getting or you're able to get. And the idea of tying people to a diagnosis and not just meeting them for who they are, where they are, and helping them move forward and be the best version of themselves seems like an outdated methodology. And so I love that you're embracing that. This is who we are and let's move forward. So what are some ways that you encourage families to do that? Like let's just talk about a homeschool setting. We've got listeners here, parents who have these quirky kids with maybe one or more of those same kinds of similarities that you've described in your own family. What do we do to help them become their best selves?
So that's the tricky part because one, again, I'm autistic. I'm extremely data driven. So when I work with families one-on-one, I ask for a ton of paperwork because I want all the data to try and figure out what pattern is going on here. A lot of times I will talk to a parent and what they think is the problem at the beginning. It may be part of what we're seeing, but it's not the root problem. And so figuring those things out is really important to finding the right thing. And it really varies depending on what's going on. If you have a kid who's hyperlexic, who's a fantastic reader, can memorize all kinds of things, knows your calendar better than you do, and all of those other kinds of things, then in that case, a lot of times we see a kid who also has trouble remembering a story. And so I will recommend that they work with a specific program, one that we created actually because I was referring to other programs that were way expensive for homeschool families on a single income. So I'm like, fine, we'll just create our own since they weren't willing to play ball with us. But I'll recommend them to something like that so we can work on those comprehension skills because you want to think about the brain like it's a muscle. It's not a muscle, but we want to think about it that way because if you go into the gym and you exercise your right arm every day and you do nothing to your left arm, you are going to start to have some problems. You're not going to feel comfortable in your body. You're going to be really out of balance. And so what we want to do is we want to help kids bring some balance to their life because I like to say that a balanced person is a happy person because if you think about some of the like really talented musicians and artists of the world, a lot of times they're not very happy people. And I feel like a lot of that's because when you have such an amazing strength, you also have some significant weaknesses and imbalances that make life harder. So we want to find some balance, but we also want to honor who that kid is. When I have a kid who has challenges with visual spatial skills, a lot of times for those kids, math is a problem and driving is a problem. So the two things I usually recommend for that is Life of Fred, because it's great at teaching mathematical thinking skills. Of all the math curriculums, that one does that the best that I've found. And it uses that strength of reading that a lot of those kids have. And then for the problems with driving down the road, I often recommend that kids play more video games, because a video game setup is very similar to driving. Even driving a garden tractor isn't the same as driving, because you don't have any blind spots. There's no screen to look through. So it really depends on the specific issues going on in the home as to what we do. It's always creative. It always is very focused. I'm not going to give you 20 different things that you need to do and research and figure out as a parent. We're going to stick to about 3. We're going to pick the most important, and we're going to build from there. We're also going to focus on things that are relatively budget friendly, unless, of course, there is no other way of fixing something. And even then, I'm still looking for the budget options. And if I can't find one, I try to create one, because I've lived this life. I know what that's like.
And when you're raising a bunch of quirky people or zebras or unicorns, like you were saying, it gets expensive. And so where you can economize effectively is very helpful. We do the same thing with picking and choosing our curriculum based on needs and interests, and building our own in some areas so that we can afford certain therapies and other things that are needed in other areas. And so I love that you're intentional about that, because so many people aren't. It's, here's the magic bullet, the silver bullet that's going to fix your problem, which is a myth. Again, listeners, you've heard me say this before. There is no silver bullet that's going to fix everything. Your kid is who they are, and you meet them where they are, you move them forward, and you help them become the best versions of themselves they can be within whatever parameters that means for the individuals that they are.
There are occasionally certain processing weaknesses that will go missed. And if we can find what that is, it can sometimes feel like a silver bullet. It's not, but it can feel that way. I've had a couple kids who have had very specific processing issues. And once we figured out what it was, in 6 months, one of them improved in receptive language 7 years on the same test. And another kid improved in, I think, about a year and a half, 10 grade levels in listening comprehension. If you find the right thing, it can feel like that silver bullet, but you have to find the right thing. And most of the time, whatever the advertisement is, that's not your right thing.
Yeah, I think about all the years that I have spent speaking at homeschool conventions, when you're going through the exhibit hall and there's this perfect curriculum for this, or this brain program that's going to fix all of the issues that an ADHD or autistic or any kind of neurodivergent kid has. Like, those just aren't. You can't have one thing that fits all. Just, I'm a gifted specialist. And so whenever someone says, I found this curriculum that's a gifted curriculum, and I say, then that's not the one for you, because there's no such thing as the perfect curriculum for a gifted student or an autistic student or a student with ADHD, because every one of them is just as discrepant and different from one another as they are from the general population. So if you've met one, you've met one. And just based on that understanding, there can't be a perfect curriculum for any of them.
No, you're totally right. And if there's an ad out there that says, this is what you need to do for dyslexic kids, this is what you need to do for autistic kids, run in the other direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it could work for some, and then it likely won't for it's just so hard, right? Because we're bombarded with advertisements, and we're bombarded especially as homeschooling parents in particular, we feel this pressure more so than any other parent. While every parent who has children with special needs feels this pull, this
big pull.
Yes, this desire to help them, right? Or to some degree fix, because we think about the world bombards us with the idea that, kids are broken or have to be fixed, which could be a whole nother episode.
Right.
As homeschooling parents, we feel that even more keenly, because we are not just mom. We are also teacher, and we are also facilitator and guide and guidance counselor and special needs teacher and this, that, and the other. And so it it's why we have to be so careful when we're vetting curriculums or programs or even therapists or whatever, because we just feel like we're never going to be able to do enough. And the truth is, you are exactly who your child needs, and you've got the ability to do that. So you just have to look at everything through that lens of, what does my individual child need?
Yeah, we also run into fear on both sides, fear that we're going to fail, whether it's as a homeschool parent or as a parent who has a child who has some kind of special need of some kind. That's a huge fear. If I fail, what happens to my kid? What are the consequences to my kid if I fail? And no, you're not going to fail if you love your child. It's going to be okay. But it is good to keep an eye out for what's available, because we are constantly finding out more through research, and there's constantly new ideas being produced that are changing how the world can be for all these neurodivergent kids. Like when I was a kid, you had to mortgage your first child and get a backpack full to get an audiobook.
Right.
And now you can just like get one with a click of a button on Audible, and it's right on your phone. That's amazing. And it could be almost any book you want.
Yeah, definitely. Things change, and they change so rapidly and dramatically. We had a situation recently, actually, we're right in the middle of it, and this will have to be an episode at some point as I'm learning more. But my youngest was having some coordination wise, and we went for a bunch of different regular checkups, and one of those was eyes. And he's 11, and we missed a diagnosis because he is so cognitively bright that his brain naturally compensated for it. For 11 years, we've discovered that he has amblyopia, which is lazy eye, but he has a rare form of it that doesn't actually drift. So when he looks at you, you don't see anything physically wrong, and it's a neurological issue, not a physiological issue. So there's nothing wrong with the eye itself, but because it's gone undetected so long, his brain has recognized that's the weaker eye, so it just doesn't use it. And without us even knowing, for 11 years, he's lacked stereoscopic vision. He does not see in 3D. And the first person who diagnosed it was an older optometrist who said, if you had caught this before he was 8, you could have fixed it, but now it's too late. And he wasn't wrong 10 years ago, but research has changed dramatically when it comes to the brain and how neural pathways work. And I did a little bit of research, and then we got a second and a third opinion, which confirmed the diagnoses. And he's now in vision therapy with a prognosis of about a year from now, he should regain stereoscopic vision. And the optometrist wasn't wrong. He's just close to retirement, isn't keeping up with all of the nuanced stuff for rare diagnoses because he's been doing it for so long. And 10, 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, when he started, there was nothing you could do for someone over 8 years old who didn't go through the patching process with a lazy eye. But we learn so much every year that we do have to keep up with some of the reading. And that's why we have to be really careful to think about, what is this quick fix that somebody's telling me is going to help my kid really doing, or what do they mean? And then you have to do your own research on top of it. So it's hard. It makes our job so much harder, right? Doesn't it?
It does, but always do your own research, because you never know what you might find. My son has pectus carinatum, where his chest is growing outwards some. And so the only treatments that you can find are bracing the chest or doing open chest surgery and putting metal bars in the chest.
Wow.
And what we've found is that acupuncture actually helps with some of it. Strangely enough, I had no earthly idea, because there's cartilage growth in there. So it's changing the cartilage in his chest. But that's not out there anywhere. We found it by completely stumbling across it. Even if you Google, you can't find pectus carinatum and acupuncture. It was connecting the dots. So yeah, I'm 100% with you. Always do your own research, because it's your kid and you want to know, is this really what the best that's out there for this kid? It's unfortunate that we have to do it. I get so frustrated myself going to doctors and then being like, I'm sorry, did you not do a quick Google search? Because if I found the answer in a quick Google search, did you really do your job?
Right. Which goes back to your earlier statement that you're not going to fail. You're not going to fail your child because you love them. So as long as you tap into that, you're going to be just fine. You mentioned that on your podcast specifically. So we'll link to all of Amy's resources and I'll give her a chance to talk about all those different things before we leave. But you mentioned in your podcast that working with these kids and finding support as easy as ABC. Can you tell me a little bit about what you mean by that and like how that can help parents who are trying to figure out who their kid is and what they need to do and where they need to go can help them?
So we came up with that because we call my business Amy Bodkin Consulting, which is ABC. And ABC is really easy. And we've broken it down into 3 steps when you come into the website. The first is A for ally. That's what our podcast is, and the merch, all of that goes in there. And it's all about advocating for seeing kids as people, especially kids who are identified as having a special need, whether that's a neurodivergence, a disability, some kind of trauma, whatever. But it's all about advocating for, let's see these kids as people. The B is for boost. And that's where we have a category for boost your educational resources. So there's a book that I just wrote that I'm very excited about, released officially last week. And then we create little short boost packets. So you can get the book, catch the vision, catch the philosophy. And I review a lot of the research that we've had over the last 100 years or so, talking about how that has played into how I've created my own kind of philosophy that I use to approach working with families. But then we have the boost packets that are small, short ones. And so then you can pick what's relevant to your kid, because if you've been around a while, that a lot of times people will have a big course or a big, this will solve all your problems. This is all you need to know. And I'm like, all right, that also has a really big price tag. We don't need that. So get the book and then choose relevant boost packets. I'm still coming out with more as we speak on there's an endless supply of different topics that need to be covered. It's just a matter of how quickly I can get them out. And then C is for connect. So that is how you connect. So whether that is through a one-on-one consult to do a deep dive, looking back at your kid's history. I had one client send me 40 different reports from doctors and psychologists and therapists. I went through every single one of them because I wanted to see the pattern. What's going on? What have we missed? What are we missing? Which things are going to help this kid be as successful as possible in being their best selves? But then I also realized that going into a deep dive like that takes a lot of my time, and it's also expensive. So between the two of those, I can't possibly get to everyone all the time. So we created a membership option because it gives you basically the same assessment tools, and it's for the whole family, but you get that once a year. And then I follow your family. So I keep these records. So if you have a problem come up and you need a letter of accommodation, no problem. We got you covered. Or if you need to turn in stuff to your state, if you need a letter to your state, no problem. We've got you covered. But we also have turned it into a virtual co-op. We had a kids run Rubik Cube club that met Tuesday. And it was supposed to be for an hour. They hung out on there for 2 hours. They were having such a good time. I was like, fine, you're running it. So whatever y'all want to do, as long as your parents are fine with it. But I've also hosted Minecraft on my own private Minecraft server for the kids, and I'll play with them to make sure we're all having a good time and safe. We've got parent run events. We've got a parent run kids book discussion. But there's also weekly office hours and a weekly parents book discussion group to help us like grow some of those skills. So it's really a whole community, because a lot of times you can't find somebody in your area who's like you, but also it's more than community. Community is a big part of it, but it's also like having a school psychologist as a homeschooler in your back pocket. So you got a problem? No problem. We can fix that. And I know all the ins and outs of that because I've worked in all sorts of different schools, and I also did advising in college. So that's not really a problem. We can also plan for transitioning out of school. There's so many options, and I never get rid of any files. If you have a problem later, it's not a big deal. And there was something else that we include with that too. What was it? Nope, it escapes my mind.
I hear that happens to me all the time. I just posted on Instagram that yesterday that I got distracted by my phone and burnt a cookie sheet of bagel bites to a crisp because just forgot that they were there. My brain wanders all the time. So if you've been a listener of the podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about CTC Math for the last couple of years. They have been most supportive sponsors of the podcast. And as I've told you before, I'm a customer. My kids use CTC Math in their homeschool. I am a paying subscriber and have been for a number of years, even before CTC sponsored the podcast. I am a raving fan, and I will continue talking about their resources and their program until long after I'm done homeschooling, because I think it's really versatile for so many different types of families, whether your kids are super strong in an area or super weak in an area of math. It allows you to customize their education when it comes to math. I've talked to so many families over the years, but I want to share with you a message that I received from Sandy, a longtime listener who was content in what they were using until, again, they weren't, and they switched over to CTC Math based on a recommendation that they'd heard on the podcast. Sandy writes, "We too started using CTC Math following your recommendation, Colleen. One of my sons is so dedicated. Then, after watching over his shoulder, my other son started using it too. They both now do an hour each workday by choice. I even enjoy it myself. I do the lessons with them, which is a handy brush up, and will occasionally do some of the algebra lessons ahead of time. Math was not my strong suit in school, but now I love it, and I wish the program had been available in the 80s. Too many people think they're terrible at math, but I truly believe we all just need a method of learning that suits us. CTC Math seems to work for all three of us." So check out ctcmath.com or go to the link over in the show notes for this episode and click on it to go over there and see the offer that they have for podcast listeners. You don't have to just take my word for it. You can take Sandy's as well. CTC is a great program and could be a wonderful benefit for your homeschool. All right, let's get back to today's episode. Okay, so you mentioned when you were just talking about that your philosophy and how that has evolved and then has led into a book. Can you tell us a little bit? Obviously, we're gonna share your book and we're gonna link to it, and so I don't want you to give away the book. But can you just tell us a little bit about your philosophy when it comes to raising special needs kids, and then a little bit just about the process of the book that you have coming out, or is it out? It'll be out. Yeah, it's out, and it'll be out anyway by the time this airs. So the book that just came out, how's that?
It's out on Amazon right now, and we've been #1 in new releases for parenting hyperactive children, and also in teaching students with developmental and intellectual disabilities. We're actually beating out Temple Grandin's new release, which
Nice. Congratulations.
is kind of exciting to me.
Yeah, definitely.
My philosophy has developed due to all of the different ideas I was exposed to in graduate school, reading different research studies, but also as a homeschool parent, being exposed to the ideas of Charlotte Mason, because she focused so much on this idea that children are born persons, that they're people worthy of being respected. And blending some of those things together, along with my own experiences, it's created this philosophy where I try to look at kids, one as being people and not a diagnosis, but also my approach tends to be holistic and developmental. So we're looking at the whole child. Just because you're having academic problems does not mean that's your root problem.
Right.
It could be there's a physiological health problem that has gone missed, like some of the things we were talking about earlier, and that if we address those, the academic problems might either go away or they would be a lot easier to address. And it's funny because a lot of times when people come to me, they're all excited about talking about education. And then I ask them all these questions about their kids' health. And they're like, what in the world is going on here? And then we'll get on a call and I start going, okay, this medication your kid is on, it's got a side effect of anxiety, and our challenge is anxiety. So why did we choose this medication? And we'll talk about all kinds of different things like that, because all of that is what builds up to being able to learn. Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs is one of the things I talk about in the book. And most people are familiar with the little 5-step pyramid where the bottom part is physiological, and then we go to safety and love and belonging and self-esteem, and then finally self-actualization. Learning falls in the self-actualization part of that pyramid. We've got to have all the other pieces in place first. Thinking about it holistically, but also developmentally. Where are we developmentally? This is where I like to use the analogy that kids are like cars. When we have our tires well balanced, things drive better. When we feel more balanced, we learn and grow a lot better, and it's a lot easier. But we also need to keep in mind, like, well, where are we? If you want to think about it from a car perspective, what kind of car are we? What kind of gas do we require? You can't put regular unleaded into a Mercedes Benz or a V28 Camaro. They're going to leave you stalled out on the side of the road. I did that once. That's how I know. This is why knowing where your kid is developmentally is important. We can still presume competence working where a child's comfortable, and that's the key. We learn where we're comfortable. One of the challenges with being a homeschool parent is we know exactly where our kids are, so nothing's ever easy because we tend to target exactly where they are. And what they need is they need some things that are easy because they just are skilled in that area and they enjoy those things. And they need a lot of things that are comfortable. And they need only usually a very few things that are hard. And most of the kids I work with, they have enough hard. They don't need any extra hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a difficult thing to balance because life is hard for most of the special needs kids and neurodivergent kids that we work with. I remember for numerous years when one of my kids was in multiple therapies and we would be gone. Occupational therapy was twice a week, physical therapy was twice a week, therapy was once a week, and then there was like social groups and things like that. She was working really hard every day, and so to come home and then do math or handwriting wouldn't have been fair. We didn't do a lot of academics during that year, and if you're comparing it to a public school or even a parochial school or a private school setting and trajectory, you'd be feeling like you're behind. But
Right.
in actuality, those academics are really, in the scheme of it, the easiest thing to catch up on when you have that other stuff in place.
Yeah.
So it's encouraging to hear that.
And the other thing is that unlike schools, we can take the shortest point between two lines. We can take that straight line and bypass all of the repetition that they're doing over the years. So we can get there a whole lot faster once we get things in place. But you've got to build a solid foundation first, or it's going to be a lot harder to get those things. If we build a really nice, solid foundation, get all of our developmental skills in place, it's not going to be that bad. Like we can catch up then. But it looks really odd a lot of times to parents because I'm like, we're not going to do any academic work this year. What in the world are you thinking? Because we're behind. I'm like, no, if we work on getting these developmental skills in place, we will catch up and we'll catch up quickly. I've seen this happen a lot with dyslexic kids because there are certain neural pathways that we need. Like we need the brain hardware set up to be ready to learn to read. Once that brain hardware is set up, I've seen them catch up to their peers super quickly, even if they're years behind.
Yeah, because we forget. So I think parents who are listening and are feeling that behind feeling, remember that within the school year, actually within the school career, kids are seeing the same thing over and over again. They have world history multiple times and they go deeper and deeper each time. But if the schools were able to just wait on it and then do deep dives when the kids were developmentally ready, they would also get all of that stuff more internalized. They have to repeat things every few years because some kids are ready sooner than others, which is why when they get to high school, those ones who were ready sooner, now they're in the AP history class or whatever. They're doing it at a different level. It doesn't mean anything more than they got it the first time through and the others need it multiple times. We get to wait until our kids are ready to pull it in and internalize it completely instead of doing it again and again and again.
Yeah, it's the same reason that it doesn't take as long to homeschool as it does to go to school, because we don't have to worry about standing in line to go to the bathroom or standing in line to go to the lunchroom or any of those other kinds of things that you have to do in a school.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, as we're like starting to wrap up here, what if you had this captive audience, which you do here, of families who are homeschooling kids who are neurodivergent, kids who have special needs, kids who are gifted, twice exceptional. There's so many in this audience who have twice exceptional kids. So they're dealing with, like me with my 11-year-old, a high cognition with some other kind of special need that is now masked and they're like sifting through to figure out what's going on. What would be your best advice when they're grappling with who is my kid? How do I meet their needs? What am I doing with them as a homeschool mom? And how do I not fail? I know that's a big question.
Just remember that they're a person just like anybody else. And we are all unique. We all have special needs at some point in our lives, because nobody gets out of this life without trauma. If you do, come back, tell us how you did, because we all want to know. I say that quite frequently, but it's true. Nobody gets out of this life without trauma. And that in and of itself is a special need, because a lot of times it requires accommodations that are not accommodated for within society. And so if we can remember and acknowledge that we all have special needs, it allows us to have an easier time accepting, being open-minded, being patient. And also it can help us get a little bit more creative, because it frees us from the box that society often has us in. And those are the really important things. Whether you're gifted, you've been traumatized, you've got a learning difference, you've got a developmental difference, you've got a physical disability, you've had some kind of chronic health condition, no matter what it is, you have some kind of a special need. And it does take accommodation. Remembering that, and that your child is a person, and to see them as a whole person, and to think about where they are developmentally, especially with twice exceptional kids, I think it's really important. Yes, let them enjoy the things that they are strong at. But if you overemphasize the things they are strong at and don't emphasize the things that they are weaker at, you're going to get more of an imbalance instead of less. And that can create more of a challenge. Just you go to the gym and you work out your arms and you're like, I don't like leg day, so I'm not doing leg day. And then you end up with problems. It's the same way with kids, and the twice exceptional ones. This is a really big challenge, because they are so motivated and they are so interested. And yes, don't hold them back, but can get so excited sometimes about the things they're really good at that sometimes we can be like, let's do all the things you're really good at. Okay, do them, enjoy them, but let's have a little bit of balance too, because we want balance. Teach yoga, and that has been a very influential on my practice for work and as a parent, because it reminds me of how important it is to have balance, that I can have the things that I love, but also need balance with the other things too, or it's going to make the things I love not as comfortable in some ways. Yeah. And I also, when I have taught yoga in the class past, I teach a lot of times family yoga. I have two rules. One is for kids, and that's to be kind to the people and the things in the room. The other is for parents, and it's mind your own mat. Because a lot of times parents are very concerned about their kids like learning how to do yoga correctly and like being in the right place and paying attention and all these other things. I'm like, no, I just want your kids to explore the experience and show up however's comfortable for them. And in a lot of ways with parenting, you got to learn to mind your own mat. They're going to learn things in the way that works for them and in the time that works for them. And so a lot of times with our kids, a lot of it's getting out of their way and listening to the input that they have to provide to us. But also our job is to provide them with balance, whether it's balance in diet, balance in activity, balance in learning. There's so many different aspects of balance. So keeping them safe and providing them with some balance. That's, I think, the best we can do as parents. Love and balance. That's actually how I ended the book.
I love that. I love that. So tell us where we can find you online. We'll link to everything in the show notes, and where we can find your book and what it's called. Because we mentioned the title, but not the subtitle and everything.
Okay, so my book you can find on Amazon and on my website. It should be on Barnes and Noble any day, as well as Walmart, but we had some challenges. I apparently have really bad luck with getting businesses to get things processed correctly. It happens all the time to me medically. I don't know what it is, but you can find it both places right now, and probably the others by the time this airs. It's called Special Needs Kids Are People Too, Seeing the Possibilities Through a Neurodiverse Lens. There's a free chapter online, so if you're really curious about the special needs title, because that's not as cool of a word anymore these days, but there is a very important reason that I chose it. We've talked some about that on the show today. I work with kids who've had childhood cancer. They don't want to identify as neurodiverse when they've been diagnosed with cancer. That is not where we're at. So that's where you can find the book. You can also find me obviously on my website, but you can also find me on Facebook, Amy Bodkin EDS, and you can find my free Facebook support group, which is Special Needs Homeschooling the Neurodivergent Way with Amy Bodkin. And then you can also find me on Instagram. So those are some of the big places to find me. A lot of times when parents want to work with me, they will either go with a consultation or they'll go with a membership option. We will be doing a book discussion of my book this summer, and it will be in the membership group. So those are some of the ways to find me.
Good. And we will link to all of those ways on the show notes for this episode. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I appreciate it so much. It's been great to get to know you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Colleen. It's been really nice to get to know you too. We've heard about each other, so nice to put a name with a face.
Definitely. Small worlds, right? Finally being brought together. So I do appreciate you so much. All right. So we will link to everything that Amy and I talked about in this episode, along with all of her social media and all of her resources in the show notes for this episode, raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast. And special thanks again to our sponsors for this episode, CTC Math. We appreciate them so much. And we'll be back same time, same place next week with another great episode. I appreciate your time. You have so many other things you could be doing with your time. And you are here. So that's great. Trust yourself. You're the perfect parent for your kid. You've got this. Enjoy them this week. And I will see you soon. Bye for now.